Show.
I'm always interested to see the new legislation coming out of the new Congress, 23 new session. Joining us right now, of course, is a fellow South Park righty. We both enjoy that show. Representative Todd Rokita, Indiana's 4th District. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey, Dana. Good to be back with you.
It's good. Yeah, it's good to talk with you. You have just reintroduced the State Health Flexibility Act. Your legislation saves $2 trillion, and it would also completely repeal Obamacare and this insane expansion of the bankrupting state Medicaid. Tell us a little bit about this and what expectation you have that this is actually going to get pushed forward this time.
Well, let me first say that it's not just Todd Rokita's bill. When I filed it yesterday, it had up to, I believe, 32 original co-sponsors. So,
wonderful.
Yeah, before the thing even got filed. So that's number one in my answer to you, if it's going to go anywhere. Rarely do bills around here have so many. I don't want to say rarely.
That's a good sign.
Yeah, it's a good sign. So that's number one. Number two, okay, we already have a state that's done a lot of this, and I'll get into the details in a minute. But Rhode Island got a waiver from the federal government to cap its spending in Medicaid and the federal and the federal allotment for Medicaid for 5 years, a 5-year waiver, and they moved with all that flexibility and with all that creativity. They moved to a managed care system instead of a fee-for-service system. Remember, Medicaid is health care for the poor. Now, this is Rhode Island. You can swing a dead cat and hit five PETA liberals, okay?
Oh, gosh.
They may all be Italian, we live in Rhode Island, but they're liberal. It's a liberal state, and they're showing how much money you can save. Now, it's a tiny state, so their savings so far, I think, over the 5 years estimated to be $100 million, but extrapolate that over the nation.
Right.
Now, I used to be a statewide office holder in the state of Indiana. Very proud to be Indiana Secretary of State before I came here. And so I see what the states can do if the boot of the federal government is lifted from them. And so what this bill does is say to the states, look, you define who is poor. Right. You can set the threshold for whoever gets to be eligible for this program, number one. Number two, you can define what health care services the poor actually deserve and need. And three, how they get it. And what I'm saying is that when you let the states do those three things, you can put a cap on the federal expenditures of Medicaid for 10 years like this bill does, save $2 trillion over 10 years, which even in Washington is starting to sound like serious money. And with the creativity unleashed by the states, they'll be able to survive and thrive under that cap. They'll be able to empower them. And, by the way, Medicaid fraud, states will be now incentivized to go after that fraud because they know the number of dollars is finite.
Yeah, and this you mentioned the word empowerment, and this seems to me is really truly empowering the states. I know in Missouri we had a big battle over this. There were several Republicans here in Missouri that thought, you know what, we'll have more power with Obamacare in this state if we just go ahead and accept these exchanges and their plans as it concerns Medicaid and so on and so forth. And that was all an illusion. That wasn't real. Right. That wasn't real empowerment. But this actually does what some of these folks were claiming that just accepting Obamacare would do.
Exactly, and you got to repeal. You got to get underneath the shackles of Obamacare to do a lot of this stuff. But it really can work. In Indiana, we had something called, again, we had to go through a waiver to get it. Something called the Healthy Indiana Plan, and a lot of folks were
Would be happy
with it
too, yeah,
because we gave poor people health savings accounts.
Yeah.
And they had skin in the game. They managed a lot of their own health care, and it worked. We were able to cover 40,000 more Hoosiers, all of them poor by our own definition, without adding a dime to our budget.
Yeah, and especially when you hear the new numbers out from Obamacare, CBO new numbers, and 127 million hours it would cost for $7 trillion more in debt, so on and so forth. I mean, these numbers don't look well, and I just, especially with the Medicaid expansion, I'm just wondering how all of these broke states already are going to be able to shoulder this extra financial burden. And we're watching doctors be run out of the practice, and it's a scary thing.
Yeah. You get Medicaid is the internal analogy I use here is it's a car that's broken down on a couple flat tires, and what Obamacare does is put more people in the car and make it go faster.
Right. Yeah.
It won't work.
Yeah, exactly. No, it absolutely won't work. So and I'm looking at the names also that are co-sponsors on this. You have some really good names on here: Jeb Hensarling, Marsha Blackburn. I mean, this has, and it is. You're right. This does mean a very good sign when you have this many already in the House that support this.
Yep.
Now, the Senate may be something entirely different if this actually passes.
Right. Yeah. We still got the Senate. I understand that, but the reason I come on this show at this time is to make sure that your listeners are well versed in it, that they know what they're talking about this issue, and they can go out and start informing their neighbors, and we can turn this. It's not going to happen overnight, but we can turn the trajectory of this country not by waiting on Washington, but by changing Washington. And this is a tool to help do that.
Right, absolutely. I want to change it up just a little bit.
Sure.
And ask you about some of the nominations. Chuck Hagel, we've seen these hearings, his testimony before both, Senate, House. We saw Hillary Clinton with Fast and Furious. I wanted to kind of get your opinion on Hagel, because this is going to be a long, drawn out slap fight, it seems. And I'm curious as to your thoughts on him and some of the president's picks.
I don't think he's the right man for the job. Let me just be as direct as I can with that, and I don't mean that in a denigrating way. I don't know the man. I do. I am becoming, as most of America is now, more and more aware of his record, and he's the wrong guy for this job, I think. And whether he was unprepared that one time and just that one time or not, I don't know. But he's got the wrong answer on Israel, number one, and what to do there. Look. I believe that Israel, number one, has the right to exist, and if not to look at the Bible as a religious document, but to look at the Bible as an historical document, particularly the Old Testament. That record shows that Israel not only has the right to exist, but the right to exist where it presently is.
Right. Yeah.
It's just that simple, and to be negotiating with people on anything that goes against those two facts is not the right guy.
Well, exactly. And John Brennan, I know, has received a lot of, that was sort of a fiery choice as well, especially now with the drone discussion being front and center, because he was one of the architects of this. What do you make of the discussion over the president using drones overseas? I know Anwar al-Awlaki, American citizen, what he did, I think anybody would be able to define as treason, but a lot of folks are becoming very uncomfortable with the president saying that it's ethical and it's okay for him and the people he chooses to have sort of this arbitrary action over who they're going to target for drones, considering this is the same admin that put Americans on that DHS terror watch list.
Right.
What do you make of this discussion?
Well, the Constitution clearly has stipulated what needs to happen in terms of due process. There's procedural due process, there's substantive due process. It's there for a very important reason, and the Constitution is there to protect Americans. And it's there particularly to protect Americans from government. So thank God, has not been what Eleanor Roosevelt and others wanted. It's not a document about what the government has to do for you. It's a document about what the government can't do to you. And this is front and center on that. And it's and it may be inconvenient, I think, to get at some terrorists with due process clause in place like this, but it is there for the protection of the people against the government, and I think we have to respect that. And with the technology we have, work around it in a negative way, but work through that so that those rights are protected.
Right. Last quick question I have for you, Congressman. And I know Indiana, we were talking specifically about this when this happened a little bit ago. True the Vote had gone after Indiana election officials over Eric Holder's absolute unwillingness to do anything about voter rolls, which is a problem that I know here in Missouri we're having because we had nobody pressing up on our Secretary of State to clean up voter rolls. Right. And I know one of the committees on which you serve, the administration, the House Administration Committee, there was some criticism, not with you, but with the committee, discussing the lack of oversight in the last Congress over Eric Holder and his, unwillingness to actually do anything about voter rolls. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, even after we've had people who testified under oath, like Chris Coates, he was never really kind of held to account. How do you respond to people who are critical of that committee and how they handled Eric Holder?
Well, it was hard for us to do anything because we didn't have jurisdiction over them from a committee perspective. The jurisdiction for DOJ lies with judiciary, it lies with government and oversight. But I stay tuned. I'm working with the chairman, Candy Miller, who's another former Secretary of State from Michigan, and we have a new chairman of judiciary now. I'm not prepared to say if that's good or bad for this situation, but I think you're going to just stay tuned, bear with me, and give me a little bit of time to try to work out the jurisdictional issues, because you're exactly right. We have to. What Congress doesn't do enough of, and very well, is that second but equally important constitutional duty of oversighting the federal government. The fact of the matter is, with the Civil Rights Division and the Election Division at DOJ, someone needs to oversight that, and it's completely way too selective on what they turn their head to and what they focus on, and it's all upside down.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate your comment on that, Congressman, and I can't wait for the next episode of South Park. Sarcastaball is my recent favorite.
I know. I heard you play it a couple of days or so ago. Maybe it was a week now.
You had to think of that. That's when I think
I fell in love with you, but don't tell my Kathy.
Yeah, you had to think of that episode after what the president said about football.
Absolutely.
Congressman, thanks as always. We appreciate talking to you.
See you, Dana.
All right, take care. All right.